this should be my last draft, but let's talk about Ian Flynn and his cronies. But before we do this, I'm going to tell you a story. This story involves the Save Archie Sonic group on DeviantArt. Now, they made a journal entry on Ian Flynn and his SJW escapades in the comics, complaining that he shouldn't do this anymore. And later on, the conversation delved into Aubrey Sitterson and how he royally fucked up G.I. Joe. Now, why am I talking about Aubrey Sitterson? Well, we'll get to that in a minute. As for Ian Flynn, this I need to get out of the way because I need to expose this guy because he has gone on long enough and he might have slipped through the cracks with the anti-SJW comic book makers, but I, however, am not one of them. You thought you were gonna get away from me? Well, you're not gonna get away from my videos, of course, but I'm going to expose you, and you're gonna like it. Now now there was a Bumblecast a while back where he mentions Sally Cole, but he says that he was not going to put it into the comics because he knew that there would be a backlash. Now, a few months later, and this was back in the video was back in 2015, July 2015. So, a while later, he would make a tweet saying, "Aaliyah and I were amazed. We got away with it being so blatant." Now, what does this tell you about Ian Flynn? First of all, he's a liar. But what about his cronies? And him? Oh, we're gonna get even more. And here he's damage controlling. Just look at it. Now these two start complaining, and his friend Jennifer Hernandez decides to post this GIF, basically talking down to them and calling them idiots. And then this guy starts complaining. Jennifer Hernandez continues to tell him he's a dumbass, telling him to calm down. And he tells her, "No, I'm not going to buy your stinking comics. Because you lied to me, and you stabbed me in the back." And I think this is a very good thing. We need to boycott these people. Now, if you thought that Ian Flynn was this savior of Archie comics, that he really cared about the freedom fighters, that he was a Son Alley supporter, I hate to tell you this, but he's a Son Amy supporter. And not only that, but he tried to get rid of all the freedom fighters. All of them. And kill off any of Ben Hurst's ideas. I mean, he literally spat on Ben Hurst's grave. And the more I go into this, the more I just get angry. The angrier I get, because I despise this man and what he stands for. Now, here's... let me see if I can't... I would also like to thank dbkit for linking this to me, because if it wasn't for you, I would never have been able to find this. This is a very important link. I think it's the utmost importance in this video. And right here he says, "Sally and the freedom fighters make Sonic stronger, but he could survive without them." So already, we can see some hints they did not want the freedom fighters in the comics. And to further prove this, the second to last issue of Archie, before it got cancelled, was ultimately Sonic leaving the freedom fighters. Now here's where this is going to continue getting more and more juicy as time goes on. Let me see if I can find that out. Oh, yes. And here he talks about why Son Alley doesn't work. For one thing, it's tired. The on-again, off-again nature of their relationship has yo-yoed since the first issue. And while Sally is a nice complementary element to Sonic, compared to Amy, we'll get into this later, she slows him down and complicates him. So if you thought he actually cared about Sally, well, well, guess what? Here's what he says to that. Fuck you. Because you're not me. And here, he talks about Son Amy. I'm going to read this entire thing. Why Sonic and Amy works. They are kindred spirits, adventurers, with a strong moral center, extremely powerful abilities, and an impish independence to make them unstoppable. The two of them together would be poetry in motion, playing off each other's abilities, but it wouldn't be hero in stereo. Amy is a compassionate, thoughtful person, when not distracted by Sonic thoughts, and her adoration of him doesn't overrule her priorities. All the time, she would be able to focus him and their banter as he would tease her, and would be fun and endearing. They're a lively young couple that kick butt. There are several grammatical errors in this. And here he complains about why he can't do it because Sega won't allow him, although I think this might be another form of damage control because I swear he made up these mandates, which wouldn't surprise me one bit. And if you're wondering why I think that, well, the Sonic PR team mentioned Mobius several times. So, and one of the mandates on the comics that was mentioned was that you could not mention Mobius. Now, take from this what you will. But let's get into the part about IDW and what I wanted to talk about. Now, Aubrey Sitterson. That name I mentioned earlier. Why do I need to mention this guy? Well, he is an avowed socialist who is writing for G.I. Joe. Yes, a socialist writing for G.I. Joe. And he did some insulting things, such as making Salvo an obese Samoan woman. I repeat, an obese Samoan woman. What does that tell you about Ian what does that tell you about what we're dealing with here? Well, Ian Fleming was brought in after Aubrey Sitterson was fired. So, the Comicsgate assault against, not really even assault, but defense against Aubrey Sitterson did nothing. Just because we got Aubrey Sitterson fired doesn't mean we have saved IDW. If anything, we just brought in 3 more communists to fill his position. That's what's happened. Our victory at Comicsgate does not change the fact that IDW still has a communist writing their comics. And they got 2 more to replace him. So what do you know? We've already made some... We've already made some improvements in Marvel. This is good. But we also need to focus on IDW. I mean, it pisses me off that we had 1 victory, and then it just goes away altogether. Now, why is it important for Ian Flynn to even get a hold of IDW and Sonic the Hedgehog? Well, I think diversity in comics put this very well. Is that when you're trying to take over a country, you have to target various landmarks. So you target the power plant, the town hall, the schools, everything that is of some structural importance. And Ian Flynn's job ultimately is to target the children. So this is why it was important for Aubrey Sitterson to be on G.I. Joe to these people, because G.I. Joe is a very big cultural touchstone, similar to how Sonic the Hedgehog is in America. Now, Sonic the Hedgehog targets children. This is why I mentioned children earlier, is because with many terrorist groups such as ISIS, the Khmer Rouge, they target children because they're easy to manipulate. And if you can target the children and turn them into soldiers, They will be obedient puppies. They will fight to the death for your cause. And there is nothing you can do to stop that. I've heard stories of 6-year-old kids being held up at gunpoint by a 14-year-old boy who is holding an RPD, which is a light machine gun. A 6-year-old versus a 14-year-old with a machine gun. And that's these people do, is that they target children. And it reminds me of the scene in Brave New World, where they take the recently born children out of the test tubes, and then they place them in these rooms with a flower. And they have them look at the flower. And then they proceed to have an explosion go off. And they hear the sounds of dogs barking, fire alarms, gunshots, whatever to elicit a negative connotation on nature. And a similar thing is happening in TV with things like the Loud House and the Powerpuff Girls reboot being prime example. It's Steven Universe. Those are all prime examples. And another example of this in the Powerpuff Girls reboot is where they had an episode where there was this horse that wanted to be a unicorn, which was an allegory for transsexuals. Yeah, but this is also part of why they reboot these things, and Sonic the Hedgehog is no exception to this. You get a hold of a well-known franchise, and you turn it into an SJW fest to destroy any sort of history that might have been built up with this thing. You have to break it down and turn it into what you want it to do. And barely anyone will notice because the information for these things has been hidden within a sea of more information. And that's just how it goes. And Ian Flynn is going to do the same thing with Sonic the Hedgehog. Now, I know a lot of people might have been angry about the Freedom Fighters not returning, but after reading Spark of Life, I'm glad they're not returning. Somewhat. Part of me wants them to return, but part of me doesn't. Part of me doesn't want them to return because that asswipe Ian Flynn is running for the comics again. Another part of me wants to because I really grew to like these characters as I read the comics. But, the new character, I guess, might be alright. Although that's incredibly unlikely considering who we're talking about here. She'll probably end up being a generic as fuck lesbian. Don't hold it out that she will be a lesbian. If I'm wrong about this, I will probably make a video of me eating a hat. I don't know if I'm going to do it, but I might. I mean, I kind of want to be surprised, although I want it to fail mostly, just because I'm sick of these people. I'm sick of dealing with these people. I'm sick of them mistreating the fan base, and I'm sick of them writing these god-awful stories. Even Ian Flynn's best stories have so many holes in them that it just becomes annoying very quickly. And it just doesn't help that he's been spinning on Ben Hurst's grave. A man who built the comics. A man who helped make the comics what they are. I mean, say what you will about Ken Penders. He had a lot of respect for Ben Hurst, even after he made a few mistakes with the movie. Even after the Sally miniseries failed, due to its poor sales, he was willing to show respect to the fans. He wanted to give Sally a good send-off. He wanted to be as respectful as possible because he thought she wasn't very popular. And because of the mandates that actually were there, because they had brought back the king, Sally's appearance would have been very minimal. Right? Her inclusion just wouldn't have been as big. But Sega stepped in and said no. So Ken Bender shows at least enough respect to the fans. Even when they send death threats to him, he still doesn't he doesn't treat them like garbage. I can't say the same for Ian Flynn. Because I know very damn well what this liar is capable of. He's easily the most overrated comic book writer in history. But... okay, what was I gonna say? What's my train of thought? Oh, crap. Oh, right. So, not only has he spit on the grave of Ben Hurst, but he's also destroying chances of the freedom fighters ever coming back. And I'm sorry to say this, but until I would like to see the freedom fighters, but right now I don't want to. Until Ian Flynn has been and his cronies have been fired, because these are horrible people who write horrible comics. That's all they do. They don't give a shit about the story. They don't give a shit about the characters. All they give a shit about is their fucking political message, and that is it. Don't expect the next set of comics to be any good. Expect them to be the same crap IDW has been pushing out for the last few years. A bunch of communist propaganda that wouldn't look out of place in Brave New World or in the Soviet Union. Expect that. And furthermore, Sonic the Hedgehog gives Ian Flynn a boost and allows him to infiltrate Japanese culture. Now, Sonic the Hedgehog might not be as popular in Japan, but it does give him somewhat of a beachhead. Now, if he gets into Japan, say goodbye to good anime, because if you target children, they'll make more children with those same ideas, and the cycle will continue. That's just how it goes. We've already seen something similar in Korea, where the company Nexon decided that they would pull one of their fighting games from the App Store, and because it had problematic women. So they removed the problematic women, and I think, yeah, they just made them less kinky looking. I don't remember if they made one of them fat or not, but again, I do know they did cover them up. But as for China and Japan, they're free of these things. In fact, China even has a special word for people like Ian Flynn. It's called baizo, which means white left. Ian Flynn is a baizo. Seriously, Ian, fuck off. Quit writing comics. Very rarely have you written anything that's actually good enough to be enjoyable. Everything else you've written is garbage. Stop writing. You are an awful writer. You're an asswipe. You, your wife, and her friend need to stop. Leave. All three of you are bizos. Because one of the reasons why I got into this stupid fan base is because I was sick of dealing with Star Wars and that crap. Now I go into another one and this crap happens. Well, guess what? I ain't just gonna back down right now. Leave comic books and go back to making hamburgers, all three of you. Fuck off. Please. I don't know what more I can say. But Ian Flynn, Leo Baker, and Jennifer Hernandez need to be fired for what they have been doing. They should have been fired for making Spark of Life. But that's apparently not enough. I mean, that travesty, if that had gone any longer, I think Ian's intestine would have actually had to throttle up to his brain and choke it to save life's kind. Not kill him, but just make sure he can't write. Heck, I almost had to gnaw off my own leg just to survive that. That's an exaggeration. It didn't actually have to happen, but it did piss me off. And having to go through it a second time was just... ugh. Part of me wants to be wrong, but the rest of me just really wants this comic to fail, because I'm sick of dealing with Ian Flynn and his stupid Bizo wife and friend. Whenever they write something good, someone else always has to step in. Heck, a lot of some of the better things of the reboot, like the egg bosses, a lot of that was written by Evan Stanley, who was actually a very good writer. She's an SJW, certainly, but she's a much better writer than Ian Flynn, and I can actually see why she got hired. But dear God, Ian Flynn, Other M is awful. That stupid Teletubbies fanfiction you wrote was awful. Chibi Jen is not a very good drawer. And Aaliyah Baker, what the hell does she even do? Or is she just there because Ian Flynn's there? And furthermore, why is Ian Flynn there? His comics were off. All of his early... Before he got into Sega, he was writing these awful fan fictions. And I've seen so many more qualified people to write these things, who I doubt even have English degrees. But for some reason, Ian Flynn got to write for the comics, and what ensued was an incredibly dumbass legacy that just never stopped. And seems like it's never going to. And if he starts writing the games, I am not buying from Sega ever again. Ever. You have my word on that. Because I'm sick of dealing with Ian Flynn and his bullshit. Ian Flynn, Aaliyah Baker, and Jennifer Hernandez, fuck off. Go back to making hamburgers. And please, just go away. All you communists that are writing in these books need to go away. Imagine if we had Nazis writing for the comics. Would that be any better? No! No, it wouldn't, because they did the same fucking shit we're doing right now. Of course, anyone else would do that, but the problem here is that you guys care more about your politics than you do about your stories. It's one thing to insert some politics into there, but when that's all you care about, why should I give a shit about your storylines when they are boring, uninteresting, and insulting? You spit on a dead man's grave. You have no respect for the fans. You have no respect for anyone else but yourself. Stop writing comics, Ian. You three bizos need to leave the industry. And if you... I'm certainly not going to buy anything that's made by you. I have boycotted you. And that's the thing, though, is that IDW might not always listen to money anymore. And they certainly as hell don't. They didn't fire Aubrey Sitterson immediately when he tanked the sales to the point where they were below Rugrats. I mean, for fuck's sake. We have to go through this again. Comic books certainly slipped underneath the rug mostly. But now there's a Comics Gate. And if Ian does more of this bullshit, I guarantee you someone in Comicsgate is going to do a video of him. Might be Captain Cummings, it might be Diversity in Comics, it might even be just some random guy. But I guarantee you one of them is going to do a video on him. Fuck you, Ian Flynn, fuck you, Aaliyah Baker, and fuck you, Jennifer Hernandez. Get off the air, you pathetic male queer, you don't impress me.